The story begins with a young boy who was working in the sun in jail. He was digging a hole in the middle of the desert. He couldn't bear the work of a boy. He cut his leg with a snake. Then we see a boy named Stanley walking on the road. Suddenly, he fell on his head. He fell down on his shoes. His shoes were great. That's why he decided to keep them. But when he was running with his shoes, the police arrested him for stealing shoes. These shoes belonged to the famous football player De Clinton, who donated these shoes. Now the police went to Stanley's house and informed his family about his arrest. Everyone thought that his family was cursed. After that, Stanley was sentenced to 18 months in Camp Green Lake. In this camp, Stanley met Mr. Sir, who was in charge, who was very stingy. He warned Stanley not to try to escape from the camp, because there was no water nearby. Apart from that, there were many poisonous animals that had killed many people. Then he gave Stanley a uniform and told him to dig a 5-foot hole every day. If he found anything useful from the past few days, he could get a holiday. After this, the camp's psychologist, Dr. Pendansky, introduced him to some boys. A boy named Zero was the youngest there, and he would always remain quiet. Then, Stanley of Lunch told everyone that he was caught in a false case. Hearing this, Zero also spoke, which shocked everyone. After this, we see that 100 years ago, Stanley's great-grandfather James had a lot of profit in his business. But one day, a dacoit named Barlow looted him. This shocked him deeply and he came to the streets. Now there was no other way, so he started working in a big man's stable. He fell in love with his boss's daughter. He asked an astrologer named Madame Zeroni how to win over the girl's heart. But Zeroni said that the girl is a fool, so James had to go to America. James didn't listen to her and went to ask for her hand from the girl's father. His father asked James to bring a big fat pig to prove his capability. James went to Zeroni again, and Zeroni gave him a pig's child and asked him to take him to the top of the mountain and feed him with water. After this, James promised that after he was successful, he would take Zeroni to the top of the mountain, so that he could be young again by doing penance there. Finally, the pig grew up and James went to the girl's father. But that girl turned out to be really stupid and started liking a man of a certain age. Seeing this, James got angry and went to America, but he forgot his promise to Zeroni. Zeroni was very angry with his actions, and he cursed the entire family of James. When he was working in the Stanley camp, he suddenly found an ancient stone which he immediately showed to the counselor. But he was not interested in stones. 100 years ago, the secret was of the warden's grandfather, Trout Walker. There, a boy named Sam used to sell onions, and he fell in love with a teacher named Catherine. Here in the camp, Stanley X-Ray and his friends got together and gave him the name Caveman. One day, he got a letter from his mother, whose stories he was very happy about. Then Zero asked him what he was reading, because Zero didn't know how to write a test. Zero wanted Stanley to teach him how to write a test, but Stanley refused because he was very tired of all the work he did all day. Then one day, while digging, Stanley found something that had a K written on it, and suddenly, X-Ray snatched it from Stanley and gave it to the counselor immediately so that he could get a day off. Then the counselor told Warden about it, who was actually a woman, who was happy with this new thing and gave X-Ray a reward, and told everyone else to dig this hole more. After this, we go back 100 years, where Sam went to meet Miss Catherine and fixed her collapsed roof. Gradually, their friendship turned into love, but the other men in the city started to get jealous of this, because he would also hit Catherine. One day, Trout Walker spoke to Catherine, but Catherine didn't give him any respect. Then Trout saw Sam and Catherine kissing each other. He got angry and burned Catherine's entire school. When Catherine complained to the police, the inspector tried to take advantage of her. The inspector said that Sam had made a relationship with a girl, and that instead of this crime, she would be sentenced to death. Catherine ran to tell Shyam about this, but someone shot her in Sam's boat, which shocked Catherine so much that she decided to avenge Sam's death. She quickly shot the inspector and kissed his face, and then she started to rob many rich contractors, and before leaving, she kissed them. After which she became famous as kissing Kate Barlow, and after Sam's death, there was no rain in that city. In the present day, one day Mr. Sir brought water for the boys. A boy named Magnet stole a bag full of seeds. When Sir found out about this theft, he decided to punish everyone. Finally, Stanley took this blame and saved everyone's life. When Stanley was taken to the Sun's warden, he scolded Sir instead of punishing Stanley. When Stanley returned, Zero dug a hole in his share because Stanley had saved them all from punishment. He was happy with this and started teaching Zero. One day, when he was teaching Zero, he realized that the thing that came out of the pit was actually a lipstick. The owner of the lipstick was no one else but the famous Kate Barlow. Then Zero revealed that the real name is Hector Geroni. Actually, it was from the family of Madame Geroni, who cursed Stanley's great-grandfather 100 years ago. Anyway, one day, In Charge found out that Zero was digging his pit instead of Stanley. He insulted them both and insulted them. Zero was so angry that he ran away, hitting the In Charge with a club. When Warden heard about Zero's escape, he said Zero would not survive more than a week. We know that Zero was an orphan and his mother had left him in a park. When Stanley heard this, he was very sad. Then at night he remembered that his great-grandfather James. As it was, 16 days had passed in the desert when Kate Barlow had plundered her cattle. Actually, her great-grandfather had gone to a place called God's Finger and saved his life. But no one knows that this place is Kanha, because when James was brought there, he had gone mad. Then the next day, Stanley also ran away to save Zero's life. After wandering in the desert for many hours, he found Zero under the boat. Zero told him that she could survive because of the pickle boxes in the boat. This boat belonged to Catherine's lover, Sam. After that, they both saw a small mountain like a human's thumb. Stanley soon realized that this is Godfinger Mountain. Now, they started climbing the mountain like them, but halfway, Zero got tired and fell down. But Stanley didn't leave his hand and lifted his shoulder and took him to the small mountain. Similarly, he unknowingly took Madame Gerani's grandson, and he went to Choti and fulfilled his grandfather's promise. He reached Choti and found a water well where Sempias grew his onions. The court declared Stanley innocent, and Stanley's lawyer took him to the camp. But Warden didn't tell him that Stanley had run away from Yanaha. The next day, Zero told Stanley the truth that Stanley had come to the camp because of him. Actually, it was Zero who stole shoes from the shop, but when the police chased him, he hurriedly threw the shoes down the bridge, which fell straight on Stanley. Stanley was not shocked to hear this, because he had found the Godfinger Hill on the pretext. After this, we go back 100 years, where Kate Barlow found a boat of $1,000,000 in a dry desert. Kate sat there and started remembering her lover. But then Trout Walker and his wife arrived there. They shot Kate and asked her to hand over all the money. But Kate didn't open her mouth and a yellow stick cut her, killing her. Since that day, the Trout Walker family has been digging holes in this desert to find Kate Barlow's treasure. Here, Stanley and Zero came back to the camp while running, and they reached the hole where they found Kate Barlow's lipstick. After digging there, they found Kate Barlow's famous treasure. But then Warden and Mr. Sir came there and took the treasure. But suddenly he backed off when he saw yellow poisonous lizards hanging on the treasure. Warden waited for the lizards to move until the next morning so that he could steal the treasure. He was surprised to see that the lizards didn't bite Stanley and Zero. Actually, Stanley and Zero had eaten onions from the hill, which caused the lizards to do nothing. Soon, Stanley's lawyer took the police there, but then Warden accused the two boys of stealing his treasure. Suddenly, Zero saw James Yelnet's name on the trunk, which caught Warden's lie. Finally, Stanley got permission to take the treasure, and Warden and his gang were arrested. Suddenly, after 100 years, it rained in that desert. Finally, Stanley brought Zero home, and they shared the treasure. After this, Zero found his mother through a spy, and then it was revealed that his mother had not left him. She was still looking for her son. Finally, Zero and Stanley bought a house together, and then they had a lot of fun inviting the other kids from the camp.